Hey, hey everyone. So we can go ahead and get started. My name is Agata and I work with the Young Women in Bio Corporation, and Wendy's here today from the Young Women in Bio as well. We are super excited about this event. We've done it in person at Alexandria Launch Labs in the past, and this year we are doing it virtually because of the circumstances. Hopefully we'll get to do it again next year in person. So what I do at Launch Labs is I put on really cool programs like this one and many others for all the entrepreneurs that you see on videos around you. My goal is to help them grow their life science companies faster. And I actually studied biotechnology in college as well. So I was a scientist originally and then turned into the business end. So today we will have a really cool discussion on how a traditional career in life sciences, medical, dental can lead to really cool jobs in entrepreneurship. And a few quick housekeeping items we'll cover right now. Please keep your mic muted if you are not speaking. And that goes for our lovely entrepreneurs and everybody else on the call. Please feel free to join by video so we can see your face. That would be great. But do note that this video is being recorded and will be available nationally on the Young Women in Bio YouTube page. We would love for you to submit questions. We do have some questions that you've already submitted when you registered for the program. But if you have any additional ones, put them in the chat and we'll try to get to all of them at the end. And last but not least, you can connect with all of our entrepreneurs that are on this call today and keep in touch and stay connected throughout the years. We will provide their LinkedIn pages in the future. If you don't have a LinkedIn yet, don't worry about it. Just save the link and you'll get it later. Now I will pass it to Wendy to do a quick introduction. Wendy, it says connecting to audio, so hopefully we can hear you. Go ahead and try.
Hi, everyone. I'm Wendy. Yes, you can hear. Can you hear me? Yes.
Yes.
Okay, great. I'm Wendy. I'm chair of Young Women in Bio Metro New York. As many of you, I recognize many of your names and have met a number of you already. But just a quick introduction to Young Women in Bio. We're a national organization. We've got 13 chapters. And our aim is really to inspire young women like yourself to become leaders in STEM. That's STEM, leaders in STEM, science, math, technology, careers, and professions. We want to expose you to different kinds of careers in STEM and hope you'll take advantage of all we have to offer. Our volunteers are leaders and professionals in many different capacities. Today, you'll hear from scientists turned entrepreneurs doing things you may never have thought of before as potential careers. And so it's very exciting. So I want to thank Alexandria Launch Labs. I want to thank Agata for organizing this. And she is also the new vice chair of our chapter of the Young Women in Bio Metro New York. So you'll be hearing and seeing a lot more of her as well. And thank all of our speakers today. I hope you enjoy the program and more to come.
Thank you so much, Wendy. Thank you. Maybe just a really quick word. I would love for our head of Alexandria Launch Labs to talk to you a moment, but I believe she hasn't joined yet. Maybe I can tell you really quickly what Alexandria Launch Labs is. We are half office and half lab, and we are space designed completely for life science startups. So all of the cool scientists that you see in videos around here are working in our labs to advance their sciences that they discovered either in the labs or with other folks. To advance their science and potentially get into the next phase of drug development. Super cool, and I want you to hear about all of this cool science that they're working on today. So we will be able to do that. I'm going to see if Whitney is here. Whitney, if you're here, go ahead and unmute yourself and say hello. And if not, we'll get back to you. So I don't know if she's here. Okay, I don't think she's here yet, so no problem. I'm gonna go ahead and pass it to Chandra. She will be our first. So Chandra, tell us a little bit about your educational path, and then a little bit about what your company does and exciting things you're hoping to accomplish.
Great. So thank you, Agata. I hope you guys can hear me. So I wanted to say hi to all the girls in the group who are joining us on Zoom today. Super excited to be talking to you guys. Just a little bit about my background. As Agata said, my name is Chandra Kosh. I'm the founder and CEO of a company called BioHarmony Therapeutics. We are developing new classes of antibiotics to treat infections caused by bacteria that can cause, for example, UTIs, bloodstream infections, pneumonias, etc. So I'm in the infectious diseases space. On the other hand, I'm quite excited about to be on this panel because I also have a rising 8th grader daughter, and she's obviously maybe interested in STEM as well. So a little bit about my background. I grew up in Calcutta, India, and I was always interested in the sciences. I was mostly a math geek to begin with, but then at some point I had this amazing biology teacher in like 11th and 12th grade, and she blew my mind, and obviously the rest is history, as they say. I came to the US. First I went to I did my undergrad in St. Louis University. There was a campus in Spain, so I started off in Madrid for a couple of years before I transferred to the main campus in Missouri. That was my first time in the US. My major was in biology, but since it was a Jesuit university, I actually got a minor in theology because I was always really interested in religion. So obviously there's a science religion component to my education. I moved to New York in 2000. It's been a while. And I did my PhD at NYU, and I worked on this bacteria called H. pylori that causes gastric cancer. So I spent about 5 years doing my PhD, and then I moved to Boston once I was done with my PhD to do a postdoc. And the postdoc that I did, the research was again in infectious diseases, in developing a vaccine for cholera that went ahead and once it got developed, was actually tested in people in Dhaka, Bangladesh. I moved back to New York in 2007. That was also the year my daughter was born. And I joined Rockefeller University as a postdoc, and I worked on HIV vaccines and C. diff vaccines, so still in the infectious diseases space. As you can see, there's a theme. I'm really, I love this space. I love anything about bacteria and viruses. Obviously, that's a hot topic nowadays. And I stayed in this person's lab. His name was David Ho, and he was my professor. I worked on HIV vaccines, like I mentioned. And in 2015, one of the things he said was, Chandra, I think you'll be really good in this whole startup space. New York was heating up, and small startups were popping up here and there. I think that's also when Alexandria had started opening its space, probably around that time. And he actually had a company in Alexandria called RenBio. And he actually wanted me to go and work there, but it was an oncology focused company. And I was like, I don't know anything about oncology. I love writing grants. I love my students. I think I'm going to stay in academia. And he was like, no, 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 go try it out. So he kind of gave me the push to get into the business end of drug development. So that was really interesting. So I joined a startup that was developing microbiome or poop pills to treat C. diff infections. And I loved it so much. I was there for about 9 months that I thought I could start up my own company. And that was in late 2016. And that's kind of how BioHarmony came about. And we've been around for about 4 years, and we are trying to develop drugs that can treat infections, like I mentioned, bacterial infections that cause pneumonia, that cause UTI, skin infections, etc. So I'm really happy to be here and happy to answer any questions that you guys have at the end. So I guess I'll pass it back to Agata, unless there's anything else that I'm missing.
No, that's wonderful. You have big goals to accomplish, and we're super excited to have you at Launch Labs. Now we are going to go to the Gotham team. We're going to start with Trina, and then we'll also have hear from Chiara on her path to joining Gotham, and let us know what Gotham does. Go ahead, Trina.
Hi everyone, I'm Trina Cuellar from Gotham Therapeutics. We have multiple sites, and I run our New York site. So similar to Chandra, I did my PhD in science, and I actually didn't think I would ever do that. My mom had cancer when I had started college, And I really wanted to know whether I could do something useful and helpful in the world in that endeavor. And so I did internships in college over 18 months at a large pharmaceutical company called GlaxoSmithKline. And there we worked directly on developing cancer medicines. And I became hooked ever since then. I was working in the lab. I actually initially considered a career in medicine and realized that I actually really enjoyed making discoveries and trying to actually create the medicines that could be used by the physicians in the clinic. And after that, I decided to take it a step further. And so I moved from Philadelphia, where I spent most of my childhood, to California. And I went to UCSF, University of California in San Francisco, and did my PhD there. And actually, I thought I would be in California for the rest of my life. After finishing grad school, I stayed in California and moved on to Genentech, where we also tried to make very novel cancer medicines. And I stayed at Genentech for 8 years before I started having the thoughts of perhaps either starting my own company or spinning out the work at Genentech. So I worked really hard to spin out the work I had started, some of the discoveries I made at Genentech, and was playing around with starting my own company at Princeton when I was approached by the founders at Gotham to really leverage all the skills I'd been learning throughout my whole life, to really, and learn from them how to run a company. They'd started a few other companies. And so I joined and lead this team where we are, still on that quest to make cancer medicines. My life passion is to, one, treat diseases, but also to hopefully optimize humans, which sounds like, it's a little bit crazy and wacky, but I really hope that we can increase our health span and, live longer, healthier lives. So that's really my main goal. And in the last year, I realized that as I start to get more on the business side of the organization, that I never thought I would do this in my entire life, but I recently began pursuing an MBA at MIT. So I run the site at Newark, and I'm also doing an MBA part-time and enjoying that very much. And I'm really excited to be here and answer any questions about my career path in science and also in business, and hopefully giving you, any guidance that you would like. And I'd like to pass that to my colleague, Chiara, who helps me run the site.
Hello, everybody. It's great to be here. My name is Chiara Vardabasso, and I work with Trina at Gotham Therapeutics. And as you can probably hear from my accent, I'm obviously not from New York, but I'm originally from Italy. And I did my PhD. I went to college and I got my PhD in Italy. And as Agata, so she mentioned she studied biotechnology at college, and I did the same. And I think it's, probably after high school that it was already clear in my mind that I was really passionate about biology and how the human body works and medicine. And that was clear to me also. I mean, even though I was really interested in medicine, it was also, even if I was younger, I knew myself and I knew that I could never be a physician because, psychologically, I knew I could not have a relationship with the patients. It would be too much for me. Maybe I'm too sensitive. So I decided to go on the path of biology and research because I thought it was, a way to advance and to still, bring my contribution to human health, even, in a way that I could handle it. And so that was definitely my, the reason why I decided this career. And so during my PhD, I started like Chandra in the infectious disease world. And I was really passionate about viruses. And so I did a lot of studies in HIV, in AIDS. And I did that for, my PhD was for, I think, about 5 years. And in particular, I was studying what I've been always very passionate about is a field called epigenetics and chromatin, and basically is you probably all are familiar with DNA, but there is a whole layer of information that is contained in our cell that is not really only written in DNA, but it's, in epi, is in another layer. So DNA can be modified, or the conformation the DNA has inside the cells can also has some information. And so I've always been very, fascinated by this field. And I was studying this field in the context of infectious disease first. And then I moved to New York for my postdoc, and I was studying the same type of phenomenon in another, very highly unmet medical need, which is cancer. And I did my postdoc at Mount Sinai for many years, and I studied my academic career there. But then my research has always been very basic. So I would say, we were not really studying potential treatments, neither to infection nor to cancer. It was always very, basic mechanism of how viruses take advantage of our cell to infect, or how cancer progresses. And so even though I enjoyed this for many years, it really became bigger and bigger in me, the need to move a step closer to translational research. So to apply my studies to, and team up with group of people who really develop therapies. And so that's why I tried to do this myself in Mount Sinai, and not blaming on anybody. It was just very difficult, at least in the lab where I was. It was really basic research, and it was really, really hard to do a little bit more translational. And so I definitely started to look around for other opportunities. And I was lucky enough to meet Trina and meet, who was actually starting the lab at Gotham and doing something that I don't think she mentioned exactly what we do. It's something similar to the epigenetics that you did? Or maybe no. Okay. So
we have been allowed to disclose it at that time. We were still stealth. So I probably alluded to that we were
so I had a hint that they are doing something similar. So it's not epigenetics, but what we do now at Gotham is called epitranscriptomics. And again, we work not on DNA modification or histone modification, but on RNA modification. And this is a very new field, very exciting. I really, I started working in this lab, and I had to catch up with a whole bunch of new literature. And it's really, really exciting. And so what we want to do is to target the proteins that are involved in this, in RNA homeostasis, in RNA metabolism, to treat disease, including cancer. And these are first in drug targets. And now I'm really happy because, again, even though I'm still a basic biologist, I really feel we are still very early stages, but I really hope that that I'm gonna see myself, that what I'm doing is gonna become a medicine and going to treat patients. So yeah, hope I didn't talk too much. Sorry.
Thank you, Chiara. So as you will see, a common trend with our panelists today is they have done so much research. And a good way to decide what you want to do if you don't really know at the end of college is get a PhD. And you'll see that most of the ladies here, actually all of them, have a PhD, I believe all of us have a PhD. Well, all of you guys, I don't. But combined, I think they have over 100 years of probably research. If you combine all of your belts together, I think we will have a lot about that much. Yeah, right? That's a lot. Now we will go to a really exciting company, and that's Yes Technologies. We have two panelists from Yes today, Siggy and Yuki. Maybe we'll have Yuki get started and let us know about what Yes does and your background.
Sure, thanks Agata, and thanks everyone for joining in. So my name is Yuki, and I'm the principal scientist for Yes Technologies. So I guess first a little bit about our company. So it's a bit different from everyone else here in that we're studying the sense of smell, and our ultimate goal is to create a digital library for every single smell on the planet. So it's kind of like having an RGB code for color. So right now the sense of smell is quite enigmatic, and there's no good way to study it. We developed a technology that can really study an olfactory receptor up close. And so ultimately what we want to do is to create a human nose on the microchip. And so I am working on the human nose biology side, and we have a team in Belgium working on the chip side. And so ultimately what we want to do with this human nose on the chip is to use it in a lot of different applications. So right now we have two main arms. So one of them is in the fragrance and flavor industry. So when you think of fragrance and flavor, you might think of perfumes, but actually it is everywhere. It's in your food. It could be the flavor of your Coca-Cola, your detergent, anything. So we're working with the big fragrance and flavor companies to make their fragrance and flavor discovery a bit more streamlined. So then it will help with their long-term costs. And I can't really talk too much about that, but the other thing that we're working on, which is what we find more exciting, is in disease detection. And so you may have read about this in the news, but there are dogs that can smell cancer, dogs that can smell Parkinson. There's even a lady in the UK who can smell Parkinson's. So we found out about this a few years back. And so we've been working on the idea of using the sense of smell to detect Parkinson's disease. So Siggy, who is the other panelist here with me, she is working more on that study, and it's really taking off now. And I think we'll have a bit of a, like something in the news about this in the next few weeks. So more to come. And so that's a little bit about our company. And in terms of my academic path, so I really fell in love with science when I was in high school. And the first lab that I went to actually was part of a program at Columbia University. So they had a high school program for the summer, and it was maybe 2 months. So then I went into a fly lab, and I knew nothing about biology, but I just loved working at the bench at that moment. So then all throughout college, I didn't really pick a single field, but I did work in neuroscience labs, so 2 neuroscience labs, 1 immunology lab, and 1 microbiology lab. So that was the 3 years that I was in college at New York University. And then after that, I wasn't sure what to do, so I became a technician for a lab out in Virginia, and that was in cancer biology. And that's the topic I really liked, so then I decided to do a PhD in cancer biology. And I went back to New York City, so that was at Mount Sinai, same as where Chiara did her postdoc. And actually we overlapped a little bit, so I knew Chiara from before. So I was working on my PhD on the topic of the link between pregnancy and breast cancer. So I was there for about 4 or 5 years, graduated, and then I went on to do a very short postdoc for 1 year in a neuro-oncology lab where we were trying to study pediatric brain cancers using a mouse model. But during that time, I realized I didn't want to go into the academic track anymore. I didn't want to be a professor. So then that was around the time when startups started becoming very popular. So then I was looking into startups. And so I took a course in careers outside of academia. And so that's how I got connected with Charlotte, who founded our company. And so we really clicked. I think I also met her again when she was presenting or pitching her company at a big conference, and I was the mediator of that panel. So then she interviewed me on the spot, and she gave me the job the next day. So I am their first employee, and we've been around for almost 3-4 years, and we've grown to 12 people now, which is great. So it's been really nice seeing the company grow from just 3 people. So yeah, and we got very lucky to have Siggy join us very recently. So I think I'll just hand it off to her from here.
Thanks, Yuki. Thank you for inviting me, Agata, and it's nice to talk to all these young people. When I was in high school, I had no idea what I wanted to do. I wasn't even aware that there was academic research. I was a complete dum-dum. And that's okay. I think what people should do when they're young is explore what's available. And if I have to give one piece of advice, it's just follow your gut and do whatever feels right to you. So I always liked science, but again, I wasn't aware of any of the options. But I felt like that was the only thing I was actually interested in. Found everything else quite boring. And I didn't have a path or a plan. I just, and I took my time. I took like a 2 years, which were a gap year where I worked for a year and I traveled. I was kind of drifting, but everyone in my family went to university. So I said, okay, I'll go to university, and sure, well, what else can I study but biology? So I did my undergrad in Israel in Tel Aviv University. And during my undergrad, I volunteered in one of the labs. It was a human genetics lab because I was always interested in genetic diseases, rare diseases. I didn't get to work on rare diseases because my undergrad project involved characterizing a new gene family, and later we found out that these genes are involved in vesicle trafficking. So I did my master's and PhD in the same lab. And the model system, we basically used tissue culture for our research, and I found that a little bit limiting, and I wanted to transition to using an animal model. So I didn't go to use mice, but I actually went to a fruit fly lab in New York. I did my postdoc at Rockefeller University. I was there for quite a while using fruit fly as a model system and learned a lot about genetics. If you guys don't know, the most advanced genetics can be done in the fly model systems. It's a lot of exciting discoveries come out of that. And then similar to everyone else, I did so much basic research that I wanted to do something more translational and actually use all of my experience towards maybe helping people. So I transitioned from my postdoc to an industry. I went to work at a big pharmaceutical company, and I was there in the bioassay group, which is why Yuki hired me, I think, because I knew about bioassays, which is what she established at our company. And then for me, I really like working in a team, but I also like feeling that I am contributing and impactful in a way. And this is why I transitioned to a smaller startup company where you wear so many different hats in your day-to-day work that you get to experience very different roles and actually use, I think, or at least from my experience, use your academic experience and your ability to learn and think much more on a daily basis. So I looked for an opportunity in New York and stumbled upon Yes Technologies, and it's been a really, really good experience. I had nothing to do with olfaction, but our company is so open-minded that they're looking for people who know how to think and answer questions and think deeply and be passionate. And I've always been very passionate about lab work. There's hasn't been one day in my life where I don't want to go to the lab from day one, which was many, many years ago. So that's my story. And if I missed anything, let me know.
Thank you so much, Siggy. It's such a pleasure to see all of you guys doing so much work and then moving towards more translational outlets for your research to actually see it go to the next step and not just every day in the lab. So great job. And let's just go to Dory now. Tell us your story, Dory.
Sure. Well, thank you, Agata, for inviting me. And it's really great to see all these young ladies, part of Young Women in Bio. I think when I was growing up, if I'd had something like this, it would have been amazing. And, I'm really lucky that I get to be part of this panel. So if someone had told me when I was in high school that I would be a CEO or founder of a biotech company, I would have thought they're out of their mind and they clearly have the wrong person. It's not me. And, it's ironic where life takes you. And I think keeping an open mind about these things is important. So I'm Dory Thomas-Carriat. I'm the CEO and founder of Synthis. We are an early stage biotech company in New York at Alexandria. And we are focused on developing new immune-based therapies to treat cancer patients. And so my story was a little bit circuitous to get here, I guess. I started working in a lab when I was in college, and I loved it. I fell in love in science right in the beginning. And I actually was very fortunate to do a summer internship at Amgen, which is a biotech company in California, between my junior and senior year. And it was just this amazing time. And I knew drug discovery was for me. That was where I was going to land. And so came back, did my PhD in immunology at WashU in St. Louis. And then I moved out to New York to do my postdoc at Memorial Sloan Kettering Cancer Center. And I really just always knew I was going into to do research. So I joined multiple pharmaceutical companies as a drug discovery scientist. And that was where I was going to be. I was going to stay there. I was going to move up the ranks. And that was the plan. And about 6 years in, the company I was working for, which is known as Roche, shut down and laid off a couple thousand people. And it was a really interesting time because that was not the plan at all. And it really kind of made me pause and think about what I should do next. And, I love science, I love drug discovery, but I'd always had these ideas about building new drugs. And I thought, well, I have all the pieces now, why don't I just try? And so I took a bit of a leap of faith and I founded my own company. And that's how Synthesis came about. It's a little unorthodox, I'd say. Most companies come with technology and they build it out. I was trying to build it from scratch. So you have to have a little bit of naivete when you start companies, but I think it's important to take a risk and take a leap. And what we are focusing on, we're very small too, what we focus on is really understanding how to turn your immune system back on when you have cancer. So unfortunately, when you have cancer, it's like a balance. Your immune system in general is keeping any kind of illnesses or sicknesses you have at bay. And then when your cancer kind of grows, the balance is off, basically, and your tumor takes over. And so your immune system has lost that battle. And so what we try to do is build drugs to kind of boost your immune system so that now your immune system can get back in the game, get rid of your tumor, and you can go back to normal, whatever that is. And, we are really early stage, and meaning that we are looking to build the drugs that will actually ultimately be taken forward. And with my ties to pharma, the goal would be to kind of work with them to get things into the clinic. And for me, being in science it was really fundamental that I found a career that I could contribute something meaningful, something that moved me, something that I was passionate about, and something that I thought every day I could do this. Every day I could do it and keep swinging and swinging and swinging, and I'll hit the ground, I'll get back up. I needed something like that. And, this honestly wasn't where I thought I'd be, but I can't imagine myself anywhere else now. So I think probably if I had any advice, it would be like, a lot of times you'll hit the ground. A lot of times that door will just slam shut. Your plan doesn't always go to plan, but there's always these windows, and you just have to see them. And if you take a look around, you'll say, hey, this wasn't what I was supposed to do, but it's something I could do. And maybe that's good. And maybe that's enough. And that's kind of really what happened to me. And, every day is not always easy. I would argue that most career trajectories for women isn't like this, it's more like this. And so that's okay. And that's the way it goes. There's a lot of things that are put in front of you and you make the choice that's best for you, and you just keep swinging and you'll get there. I think that's it for me. I think I'll stop there and that's it.
Thank you, Dory. That's beautiful. I think in a way, entrepreneurship can be defined in so many ways, but in a way, with what you said, it's putting the pieces together and having a great big goal and doing this and this and this throughout your life to get there. And maybe it's an idea you have when you're really young and then you're just so passionate about it, or maybe it's something you meet across the way and it's an introduction or something. So I would like to really quickly also introduce Whitney. She's on the phone. Whitney, just say hi and tell us about your really cool background and how you ended up joining Launch Labs and then running this thing.
Oh, you're so nice, Agata. Can you hear me okay? Thumbs up?
Yes.
Okay, great. Wonderful. Well, I apologize that I'm not on the video. I'm kind of somewhere with unstable internet. So if I go out, I'll just look for Agata's signal. But, I feel so privileged to be part of this discussion. I think there's so many women on the phone today who inspire me on so many levels. I work closely with Agata and Yuan, who are on the phone, and I hope they share their stories too, because they, on a daily basis, make the most incredible team members, and I'm just so humbled and grateful to have their support and camaraderie and partnership. It really makes my job, so fruitful, along with all the women on the phone who've already spoken. Their work in science, I think, is really what, inspires me so much. And so, quick background about myself, and then I'll tell you kind of what my role is now and why I work with Agata and Yuan so
Oh, Whitney, we just lost you. Maybe you'll come back. We'll give it a second.
everyone on the phone. So I'll feel my, oh shoot. Okay, can you hear me? Okay. growing up, my dad was a doctor at Dana-Farber, which is a cancer hospital in the Boston area. And I think I was just so inspired by the fact that he would get up every day and work so tirelessly and was so passionate about what he did. And so, you know, from a young age, I was like, I would like to be a doctor too. And I think one thing that my parents tried to instill in me, and I really tried to take to heart and feel very grateful for their advice, is that, you know, you can set out to be something or someone, but just kind of remember to check in with yourself along the way, because it's not really the ultimate goal of getting the degree or getting somewhere, but it's really the joy of the learning and the hard work and that goes into every step along the way. You know, as Dory and others have said, you know, it doesn't take kind of a linear path, but sometimes it has fits and starts, and sometimes you find yourself at a dead end and need to backtrack a little bit and go another way. And I think that part of the process is what I've really tried to stop and enjoy, given that it probably makes up the entirety of our time. And so, you know, going through college, I was really interested in becoming a doctor and did translational research at Dana-Farber, this cancer hospital, and worked on making vaccines for patients out of their own cells. And I thought this was such an incredible thing to see translational research, so research that kind of connected, you know, work in the lab with patient care, and to be at the nexus of this engagement and interaction. And that was so inspiring to me. And so I kind of set out to say, I'd love to become a physician, and I'd love to see where I can have, you know, an impact in this area of getting better treatments to patients. And that's kind of guided most of my career, although, you know, I went to medical school, so enjoyed patient care, and ultimately decided to go into more of a business focused role. And so, you know, sorry to make this story so long-winded, but after medical school, I decided that I really wanted to work at the intersection of medicine, healthcare, business, investments. And so I tried to talk to everyone I could to see their stories of transitioning from medicine into a business role related to medicine. And little by little, I kind of just would write down pieces of their stories that resonated with what I thought I wanted to do, because I had no idea. I had this fantastic degree. I was going into a job at a consulting firm called Bain and Company that does a lot of healthcare work. And I was like, I would love to build biotech companies and invest in biotech companies. How do I get there? So I think, you know, the thing about conversations like today, and I think some of the best advice that was given to me is really, you know, seeking out those who've done something interesting, piecing together their story and seeing where it fits in with your heart and kind of where your motivations lie. And ultimately, I ended up going to business school at Harvard, and had an incredible time for 2 years and learned quite a bit on the operations and management side. And afterwards worked at a biotech company called Celgene that was primarily focused on oncology, and, you know, was really helping do deals for Celgene to acquire new products for Celgene's pipeline, and make investments. And I absolutely loved that. And afterwards, I did venture capital for a year, and then came to my role now, which is helping lead Launch Labs. And I think Agata, I'm sure, explained what Launch Labs is at the beginning, so I'll skip that. But, you know, I feel so lucky to work with all the companies and teams, many of whom presented already today, you know, and just trying to ensure that we have a great atmosphere for their work to see its greatest success. And so, you know, I feel, as I mentioned, very privileged to work with everyone here. And again, it really is what kind of motivates me every day, you know, and is a nice culmination of, you know, sort of the medical background and the business background and all the experiences. So sorry to be so long-winded, Agata, but thank you so much for the opportunity, and happy, of course, to discuss kind of this odd path through medicine to business, you know, at any point, if that's of interest.
Thank you so much, Whitney. I think that is the beauty of it all. It really, there's so many paths you can take and so many things you can do that are wonderful and help advance human health in a way. So I think you girls that are here on this call are miles ahead, at least of me, when I was starting out and didn't know what I wanted to do. I didn't have a group like this. This is wonderful. So whether it's going to be connecting on LinkedIn with us a year from now, interning at a lab, or meeting somebody at a conference like Yuki did, there are so many things that you're doing right and so many great opportunities. So let's talk a little bit more about that. But before we get started, I just want to really quickly introduce Yuan. Yuan, go ahead and say your background and how you joined. And she's not one of our entrepreneurs, but she is my colleague at Launch Labs, and I want to share her story too.
Thanks, Agata. Yeah, so I work in partnership with Agata, Winnie, and Marina at Launch Lab New York, mostly focused on operational projects and some special projects in regards to strategy. And I think a common theme here may be that we never really saw the path to where we are now because we weren't engaged in programs like these early on. I was really influenced by my father, who's a dentist, to go and pursue science from the start. Thought I would be a doctor, and kind of realized when I sat down to take the MCAT that I wasn't sure I wanted those hours and to work in a hospital in the long schooling it takes. Like, very kudos to everyone here with a PhD or an MD or any grad degree. It's a lot of work. And then so I decided to maybe think about pursuing research. I'd done research in undergrad and I had enjoyed the experience, but in seeing and working with like grad students and PIs, kind of realized that that wasn't really my passion either. It's such important work, but I wanted something that was more physical and a bit more kind of corporate. I was interested in exploring other ways to use my interest in biology and human health, but in a way that suited my personality a bit more. And that's how I ended up in New York. I worked at a digital health consulting company for a year and then moved to Alexandria because I found the real estate side of it as a really interesting angle. And from there, I've joined Launch Labs in the last year or so, working with startups. It's been a really interesting journey. I can't tell you where I went right or where I went wrong. It's too soon to say anything, but I really hope you guys listen to your heart and know that there's so many avenues to pursue something you're interested in. It doesn't have to just be the ones you've heard of the most or that your parents have put out in front of you. And biggest takeaway is just to reach out to people who are doing something you think you might be interested in. I know so many women who have gone before me and pulled me along and embraced me when I asked them for advice or an introduction. And that's really, I think, the best thing you can do in the practical world, because you're not going to be exposed to all the opportunities that are out there from the get-go. So just be open-minded, listen to your heart, and don't forget that everyone always is rooting for you.
Thank you, Yuan. Maybe I'll quickly mention, Yuan mentioned real estate. So Alexandria Launch Labs is part of a bigger company. It's called Alexandria Real Estate Equities. And what Alexandria does is provide actual space, rental space for labs and offices, but mostly we focus on life sciences. So that's how it all ties together. Now, we have great questions from the group that were submitted prior. If you have any additional questions, put them in the chat. I see a few came through already. I would love to ask first, for our panelists, what are some, well, this is questions like the ladies asked, what are some networking and other things that you would advise the girls to do to get to a career that is similar to yours? And maybe what are some characteristics that you think are required for somebody in your role? So some things you can do and some things that you should be. And maybe I'll go to Trina first, and Trina, you can go ahead and pass it to anybody that raises their hand next, like that.
Sure. Yeah. So I'm very happy to discuss this question. So I think early on for me, one of the things that was super helpful was really building strong relationships with my professors and teachers early on. My family has I don't have any doctors, scientists, in the family. I would joke as a child that I wanted to be a professor and work in science, but I actually never really thought that would happen. And so in high school, really go out there and chart your own course. You don't have to fit in a box. And so really in high school, they said, oh, it'll take 4 years. I was like, oh, I'll show you, I'll do it in 2, I'll do it in 2.5. And, really just kind of be a little bit of a, feel free to be a nerdy rebel and chart your own course and try to stand out amongst, with your teachers. And it was really my teachers that fought for me. Like I never thought I would get into my dream grad school at all. And I'd worked in labs as an undergrad and really kind of built strong relationships with them. And they wrote me really strong letters. And in the end, that helped me tremendously early on. And then as I got older and I had a LinkedIn, I link in every day almost. Like I add everybody. So feel free to add me. I'm happy. I try to put people in contact with others all the time. I know some people are very choosy about it. I don't care. You want to get to know me, I'm happy to accept all of you and connect you. So don't be shy about, writing to people. Some people won't answer cold emails, cold calls, but I honestly really appreciate people and women and everyone that take initiative. So if you email me and say, hey, I want to know how you did this, or can you advise me on this? Certainly I'm, like many of us, we're way overwhelmed most of the time. So it might take me a little bit to get back, but I do really encourage people to reach out and join clubs like this. I didn't have anything like this as a high schooler. I went to we barely had a functional science program in high school. And so I think really being in an awesome program like this is a huge step forward to really making those long lasting connections. But yeah, teachers, mentors, LinkedIn when you get a bit older. That's briefly my advice.
Chandra.
One of the things I've noticed recently, and maybe this is something for the newer generation with social media, I look on Twitter once in a while, and what I found is like there are a couple of women scientists on. I follow them because of their science. One of the things I've noticed is that they're one of the helpers. So engage with them on social media, which it's almost like second nature for the next generation, I think, and look out for the helpers, and they're always there. So like Trina mentioned, reach out, to anybody you think who could be a help with anything, like a mentor, or even like for any kind of guidance and whether the path you're thinking about taking is the right path or not, or just to even try out anything. So I think seeking out helpers is a pretty good way of doing things. I've had helpers all along the way. And I don't think I would have made it this far without the helpers. And they could be your teachers, they could be mentors, they could be like complete strangers. And most people like helping out. So, I would go with that. And whether it's through LinkedIn or Twitter or I don't know what else there is, but I think you guys will figure it out as well. So that was my 2 cents.
Thank you, Chandra. And one of the things Trina mentioned is reach out and stay connected. And that's actually exactly how Chiara got her job. Chiara, do you want to share that really quick?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, definitely. I mean, connections to people definitely are, it's what is what brought me to Gotham. Indeed, I had the opportunity to meet Trina, or need to know what they are doing just because of my connections with my other scientist friend. Actually, my best friend, he happened to know Trina because they did the PhD together at UCSF. And everybody mentioned already LinkedIn, and so my friend Alex, he told me he knew I was in that stage in my life. I was looking for opportunities, and I felt a little bit too tight where I was in my lab in Mount Sinai. I was really looking for something else that I didn't know yet what. But so Alex told me, I saw this post, this friend of mine, Trina, is starting a lab, and she didn't say much, but she mentioned a couple of keywords in the post. So there was this epitranscriptomics that I mentioned to you before, and she said startup, and she said New York, and she said to treat, highly unmet medical needs. And it really resonated with me, and I decided to reach out. And so I did reach out, and Trina always laughs when I say that, but she didn't really get back to me the first time. I also think it was not the right time because it was during the Christmas holiday. So maybe, fair enough, she wanted to take a little bit of days off. So I have to say I was really sad. But then, because I thought, even if you know somebody, is it really that hard to get there? And so I said, okay, I waited, I was counting days, and it was like 3 weeks after, so okay, I'm gonna email again. And then she emailed, that time she got back to me and she apologized, said, sorry, it was not a good time. And then we met, so I went down to Alexandria, and we had a very nice lunch together, and she shared a little bit more information. I mean, what she could, because at the beginning, especially, companies are very, secretive, obviously, to protect themselves. But she, whatever she said science-wise, really, really made me very excited. And I did start to read and study a little bit more about the field. And we have been in touch from there for a few months. And, back then she didn't really know yet how, there was the moment the company was fundraising, and they didn't know if there was a budget to hire people and how many people. And I was also, I don't know if any of you is not from the US, but I was also I had to deal with some immigration. So I had the problem that I didn't have a green card at the time. So it was really, if you are outside of the academic world, especially in a big company, maybe there is some possibility, but in a startup, it's really, really hard to have a visa sponsored. So I had to take care of, fix and get my green card myself. So I was still waiting for that. So there was a juggle of a few months, and then I got there. But yeah, and what I wanted to say is also, when I moved to New York for my postdoc, I also had to send the famous second email to my mentor, because she didn't get back to the first time, and she really appreciated that I reached out. So that's also what Trina mentioned, like, to appreciate the initiative and the motivation. It's something that in my life so far has always very much paid off, to, not to be shy and show my motivation, and, to be perseverant. If you really want something, it's not 100% you're gonna get it, but at least try a few times, and don't try only once. Because again, if I didn't reach out the second time in both these experiences, I wouldn't have had any of those. And yeah, and I'm also in the philosophy, I don't mind asking in general. So if I have to ask twice, I do. And yeah, and it definitely helped me.
Thank you, Chiara. And Chiara is so nice. You catch more honey with bees, or whatever the saying is. It's so true. You're just so sweet and nice. So one of the questions that came through was about volunteering or doing internships in the lab. So Alexandria Launch Lab is a little bit particular. We don't take interns unless you're over 18. But there are other companies that do, and you can always come to us when you're in college already and want to do an internship. A lot of the interns at Launch Labs get their position through Life Sci internship program in New York City. You may have heard of it already, or maybe not yet. Just jot that down and keep an eye on that in the future. Now we have another question in the chat from Abby, and Dory mentioned some obstacles and stuff that you had to overcome. Now, can you maybe mention a story of failure or a low point in your career that you were able to overcome, and maybe some tips for keeping going and, staying positive, and anybody else can jump in too.
I think you're asking me to address that, huh? I gotta, gosh, being in like entrepreneur is just, it's a whole wild ride. I mean, you're kind of always up and down. And honestly, I think probably, maybe not necessarily, I would say a failure, but something really that threw us was when Rose shut the site down. I keep going back to that, because if you've ever heard of like a site being shut down, there was like 2,000 or 3,000 of us that got laid off at the same time, which is, it's devastating, and these are people's livelihoods and perspectives. We had people in my group that had come from abroad, and their visas and everything was tied to the company. I mean, it was such a mess, and it was so depressing. And I think how you get through things is with every, like everything, I think is just a balance of perseverance, like everybody here has been talking about, and like a lot of grit. And I think that's so fully fundamental for everything, really. But I think if you're going to be an entrepreneur, if you're thinking of like careers that take a long time, you just keep swinging, and you dig deep and you think, is this where I'm going? Is this the right direction? And you move one step in front of the other. That's it. Don't, like for me, like I like big pictures and I like thinking about it, but I always make sure that I think, what's that next step? Goal done, check. What's the next one? Goal done, check. And so for me, lists are really important. It keeps me on track, it keeps me motivated, and it also helps me keep my eye on the prize. Like I felt like when Roe shut down, I kept thinking, like everybody around me literally was like, I need to find a job, and ran. And I thought, well, I don't think I want to run right now. I think I want to take a minute and think about that, because it seems that I could do something differently, you know, and that's really what happened. But, you know, it was a really bad moment when that happened. And so, you know, I think it was a chance to pivot. I did. And ever since then, it's literally been like one step until you get there. And that's what I would advise.
Thank you, Dory. Sometimes that is incredible. And maybe we can have one more person discuss theirs. So whoever wants to go. For me, I think what really helps is when you're at a low point, you put your hair up, you have a good snack, you put some good music on, and you make a vision board. And that vision board can change all the time, and that's okay. But I think when you're at a low point, you can look up to people that are inspiring, and that maybe you're like, oh wow, their life is so perfect. No one's life is perfect, right? We all go through those steps. Like Dory said, this is your path in life. It's never like this. So just focus on that and make a vision board and have that good music and put your hair up, and it helps a lot. Now, does anybody else want to add a little bit? Yeah, go ahead, Yuki.
So my career has not been long enough to have too many moments, but yeah, one big thing was when I first joined the company. So we had 1 year to make a bioassay work from scratch. There was nothing in place. We had the animals, so we have a mouse model. So our goal was to make a benchtop assay work. And we had no investors back then. And for the first 8 months, nothing worked. I was the only scientist there. We have 2 co-founders and they don't do any bench science. So I was pretty much alone at the bench every single day for 8 months, doing something that didn't work. It was very depressing. And this actually happens a whole lot if you are in a PhD program. 90% of the stuff does not work. And so from my PhD, I kind of learned that, well, you have to pivot and kind of give up and move forward if something doesn't work. So that's exactly what I did. And yeah, I decided to pivot and look at an entirely new bioassay format, and that seemed to work. So we went from not having any investors to having 2 new investors, and I think $2 or $3 million from a government grant because of the one experiment that worked and we submitted. So I feel like in startups, especially, things can change overnight so quickly. And so, yeah, I think a lot of panelists already mentioned that perseverance is important and not giving up and just keep on going. I think that is really key. So that's my somewhat big company failure moment.
Thank you, Yuki. No, that's ideal. You know, you kind of, it's never right. It's never a path all the way up. It's always so, yeah, you have to have a lot of grit. So in terms of time, it's 5:30. If any of you have to sign off, go ahead. We're going to answer a few more questions, but I just really want to let you know, we will provide in a follow-up, Wendy will help me, we will follow up with you and include all of our entrepreneur LinkedIn links so that you can stay in touch with them throughout the years. And we would love to welcome all of you to come to Launch Labs when it is safe. So when COVID is over and maybe one of our cool companies has a vaccine available, we will be able to do a tour through Launch Labs and have a pizza party and then science experiments, the whole thing that we've done in the past. So just with that, we're going to answer one more question. Katya asked us for any tips and strategies for building relationships with teachers, mentors, reaching out to people in general. So Trina went over a few things like cold calling, aka just messaging them on LinkedIn if you don't have any connections. A lot of times it helps to have a person in common, but let's listen to what our entrepreneurs have to say. Go ahead, Siggy.
One thing that I've learned is a lot of the time mentors like to mentors. They like to talk. So if you schedule a meeting with anyone, a teacher, someone you worked with, people are really, really happy to tell you their story. And I think in general, from my experience, all the mentors that I had were just people who really liked to tell stories about science. And if you show that you're passionate and you're interested, I think that's always a good opportunity to develop a relationship. And regarding networking, I just wanted to say that you have to network everywhere. I met Paul, the other co-founder, at a kid event. There was no networking involved. It was just like blabbering about stuff. And then, you know, Paul is a professor. He likes to talk about his science. All of them love to talk about their science. If you go and ask a question and you show interest, they'll just talk to you. And I got a job out of that. So always network and always go and ask questions and be a good listener. That's the way to talk to your mentors.
All right, Yuki and then Trina.
Yeah, just to add to that, so I did something called a career interview, which was recommended by like a guidance counselor at my graduate school. So what it is you go up to people with a job that you're potentially interested in and you interview them. So it's kind of like a reverse interview. So you ask them what their day-to-day is like, what they like about their job, what they hate about their job. So then you kind of get an idea of what they do for a living. And as Siggy said, they love talking about what they do for a living because usually they like it. So I think you get a very honest sense of what a job in that field will look like. So in grad school, I career interviewed with medical illustrators. I interviewed with patent lawyers. I interviewed with professors. And those were people I didn't know before I reached out to them. So I think that's a very, I'd say unique but friendly way to start a conversation with anyone.
Go ahead, Trina.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I don't know how much I have to add to that, but I actually got my first job after grad school from a party. So I had started dating my now husband, and he invited me to a barbecue, which I actually didn't really want to go to because I'm kind of an introvert, and I didn't know anybody there, and so I just kind of walked around and did the thing that maybe is okay in some circumstances where I just asked people what they did. And I met my husband's colleague's wife, and she's like, "Oh, we're looking for this person." And I was like, "Oh, I do all of that." And actually, I had just applied a week ago, and it ended up being the lab that I applied to. And I got a job from meeting someone that worked in the lab at a random barbecue party. So there can be random circumstances, at least that happen, where you just ask people and have some curiosity about what people do in a normal setting. But outside of that, if your school has a co-op or internship program, those are good opportunities to get a foot in the door where they're meeting with a lot of people that have no experience. It's not like you're really competing with people with experience. And that's really how I got my foot in the door and working in research, is first starting by doing a co-op internship program at GSK, and then volunteering in professors' labs to meet and network with professors that could help me figure out whether I wanted a career in science.
Thank you, Trina. That's excellent. Maybe one more question we can all try to answer is, COVID obviously has affected all of us, school, meetings, anything, all of it has been very much affecting all of us. And even having an event like this, it's virtual now, it used to be in person. So do any of you ladies have advice on how to cope, and maybe something that's really helped you through this kind of uncertain time? Anybody take the floor? Maybe I can start. So for us, what helped us is pivoting. Originally, we had a plan to do things one way, and we just sat down and we said, things are different. Let's reorganize and reprioritize. And that's why we were able to do things like this event today. You have to have the grit and ability to change quickly. And to be built to last, you have to be built to change. That is one of the favorite quotes from our company founder. And it's very true. So does anybody else want to add anything, and any closing thoughts, any inspiration? Wendy? Oh, Wendy, you're muted. I muted your cell phone, so you have to unmute it. Sorry, Wendy, can't hear you. Maybe type it in the chat. But yeah, so there's great feedback in the chat, great advice. Maybe save the chat and use it for future purposes. Please keep in touch with the newsletter, with the Young Women in Bio newsletter. We are going to let you know about any future events that are happening, and watch out for any events within Alexandria Launch Labs. And we hope to repeat this soon, and maybe in person. I want to thank all of our presenters and all of the ladies for joining today. Thank you so much. And if you have any additional questions for our lovely ladies, you can let them know through LinkedIn. Thank you, everybody.
I just want to say thanks, everybody. I live in California, so this has been a treat. I've been trying to go to different virtual regional meetings and meet ladies and women in bio. So I've enjoyed everything so far. There's been a couple of events today, so I'm excited about getting to learn and know more about all of you.
Thank you so much. Yeah, it's great to have this virtual, virtual is national, so that's great.
Yeah.
Thanks so much, ladies. Have a wonderful night, and we'll see you soon. Bye, everyone.